The synopsis on a guilty plea, what is it? How does it differ from that of a general occurrence report? But more importantly, why is the synopsis on a guilty plea, why has it never been more important than right now in light of the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, that is exactly what we're talking about and more, so stick around. But first, roll the intro. Good day, thank you for joining. I, of course, am Brian Lass, and much like I've already alluded to at the beginning of this video, the synopsis on a guilty plea, there most certainly has never been a time as to which this document has been more important, again, in light of this current landscape that is the COVID-19 pandemic, and really for the main reason that the pandemic has, for lack of better description, pushed the court system into the 21st century. So what does this really translate into? Well, whereas historically you would have someone endeavoring to visit a justice of the peace in person, whether it's a warrant officer with a stack of informations or the issuing officer themselves, of course the justice of the peace would hear the allegation in person, face to face, and perhaps even make his or her inquiries, and there may be a little banter on record back and forth. But of course what's happening now is, in light of the, again, already alluded to, court system endeavoring to visit the 21st century, justices are now receiving information electronically and do have that ability, both in a criminal context and regulatory context, of course, under the Criminal Code Section 508. And under the Provincial Offences Act Section 23. So again, in receiving these informations electronically via email, of course, the justice is receiving the information, some type of affidavit that goes along with it, and what else? Yes, you guessed it, the synopsis on the guilty plea. So again, whereas the justice historically would be relying upon this in-person, face-to-face conversation as to which this person visiting the justice would give all the information verbatim, there could be some inquiries, as for example, it is just the synopsis on the guilty plea being relied upon by the justice at its face value to show that this matter is prima facie. So, of course, what does this translate into? Well, as we've already alluded many times, really, the synopsis on a guilty plea has never been a more important consideration. So, how do we put it together? How do we construct it? What is supposed to be in there? Well, if there's one thing and one thing alone that I certainly hope it is that you take away from this video, it's that please, whatever you do, do not merely copy and paste a general occurrence report that had been created in regards to this matter and merely copy and paste it into a portion that would be for the purposes of a synopsis on a guilty plea. Because I will tell you right now, never quicker will you ever endeavor to peeve a justice of the peace to nuclear catastrophic proportions. So again, merely, for lack of better description, the synopsis on a guilty plea is basically just going to show that all the material items and consideration, the facts and issue have been met, date, time, location, ID, and again, the essential elements of the offense. So again, merely it's just succinctly portraying that the matter is prima facie, and this will be presumably and plausibly to the satisfaction of the justice of the peace. So how exactly do we do that? Well, let's bring up a sample and visit this together. So what we have here is a synopsis on a guilty plea for what otherwise can be described as a straightforward mischief under, and admittedly it may be the case that your agency does use its own sort of templated version of a synopsis on a guilty plea included of your agency's logo or something to that effect. But, so as to do this at sort of a high level, the agency neutral example, if you will, I am just simply doing this on an MS Word document, much like you can see, and much like I've entitled this, Synopsis for a Guilty Plea. So what I would suggest to you is where this should always begin is with the particulars pertaining to, of course, who's involved, where this took place, and what the actual allegation is. And that is, of course, exactly what we've done. We've started with our accused party in this matter, John Doe, date of birth, date and time, which is Friday, August 14th, 2020, 1100 hours. Location, which of course will satisfy jurisdiction. For this matter, it's Unit 716 of 123 Yonge Street in Happy Land, Ontario, which may or may not be an actual city. Our victim, Jane Smith, date of birth, and the charge, of course, mischief under Section 430, Sub 1, Paragraph B of the Criminal Code of Canada. Now, where this synopsis actually begins will be very much similar to that of a general occurrence report, of course, date, time, location, things of this matter. But you can see as the synopsis goes on that it's, very much more high level and very much more succinct than that of a general occurrence report. So let's just endeavor to read this together. So on Friday, August 14th, 2020, at approximately 1100 hours, the victim was at home in bed located at 716 123 Yonge Street, Happy Land, Ontario. At this time, the victim heard a key turn in the front door lock of her apartment and the door being open. The victim advised that she had a chain lock engaged on the above noted door, as well as a 4-foot bar across the door on the inside of the apartment so the front door would not open all the way. The accused, unable to gain entry to the apartment, began to kick at the front door, thereby causing damage to the door frame and further rendering both the door handle and lock inoperable. So, of course, that paragraph right there is speaking to what the actual allegation is, that caveat under 430, Sub 1, Paragraph B. And even for that matter, more than the actus reus itself, this of course goes to mens rea as well. Certainly we have an accused person here who, out of frustration, unable to gain entry, most certainly, intended perhaps to damage this door to gain access. But nevertheless, let's continue on. So the neighbor from Unit 17 began to yell at the accused, at which point the victim yelled for someone to call 911. Officers of the Happy Land Police Service ultimately arrived on scene and located the accused, who was later determined to be the victim's ex-boyfriend, further arresting the accused for mischief in relation to the damaged apartment door, reading his rights to counsel, and releasing the accused at the scene on a Form 9 appearance notice for mischief under. Now, the one only other thing we've listed here being that, of course, we know there's a mischief under and a mischief over. So, presumably the person creating this synopsis on a guilty plea actually knows what the damage as far as the monetary value was going to be equated at, and that is the only other thing we've added here, damage to property. Of course, it's the front door of this apartment, $1,000. So I would suggest to you that most certainly the synopsis has covered really what would need to be covered for this matter to be prima facie. So we have the actual accused, we have the date, time, location, and we have the actual essential elements of the offense. That paragraph talking about the fact that, of course, the accused, did kick the front door and as such caused damage, rendering both the door handle and lock inoperable. So most certainly this would be a much more, succinct and shorter version than that of presumably the general occurrence report that would go along with this incident. But again, what we portrayed here is that the matter is prima facie, and this will be presumably to the satisfaction of the justice of the peace receiving it, in order for the justice to swear to the information that would accompany the synopsis and the matter to move forward. Now, with that last synopsis for a guilty plea being reviewed in relation to the mischief under, another such scenario may be that you are endeavoring to charge someone in relation to a breach of some type of condition. Now, this may be in relation to a breach of recognizance, a breach of an undertaking, or maybe even for that matter, a breach of a probation order that came out of some type of disposition. Now, most certainly in those regards, I would suggest to you, as you can see on your screen right now, there may be an additional consideration, i.e. some type of background portion, as we've entitled it here, that you most certainly may want to include, again, for the further consideration, just to make this a little bit more, black and white, if you will, for the justice of the peace to be distinctly satisfied that, this condition this person plausibly breached, most certainly invoked at the time. So let's just review this verbatim. So, of course, this is, again, a synopsis for a guilty plea. The accused, John Doe, date of birth. Now, this is going to be in relation to the charge of failed to comply with order, Section 145, Sub 5, Paragraph A, Criminal Code of Canada. So that should tell us, plausibly this has to do with maybe a breach of a recog or some kind of release order, or maybe even an undertaking. But nevertheless, of course, we have the date and time as well. And we've gone with the same date and time, Friday, August 14th, 2020, 1100 hours. So as you can see, I have not written out a synopsis. We've already sort of gone together how to create a synopsis. But of course, the additional consideration here being that we are now dealing with a breach of some type of condition would be background that speaks to this. So let's go through this together. And what we have here is on the date, and again, date released signed. So what we would actually put in there is the actual date that this accused person was released on this recognizance that possibly they're breaching. The accused appeared before a justice, and we would put the actual name of the justice of the peace who signed this release order or signed this recognizance, so the name of that justice of the peace, at the Ontario Court of Justice, having been charged with the offenses of, and of course what we would want to put here is what's listed on the release and the date charged. So in other words, this recognizance was created in regards to this person being granted bail with this accompanied recognizance, their conditions, but that's stemming from, of course, respective charges. And, obviously these charges would have been issued on a respective date, and that is what we're going to put right there. So the actual charges and the date of those charges is to which this recognizance stemmed from. And now moving forward, we have, in order to facilitate their release from custody, the accused enter into a recognizance of bail, agreeing to abide by a number of conditions, including but not limited to the following. And what we would want to do there is write out the full conditions as it appears on the release. Now, most certainly with that out of the way, as we go on and write our synopsis, it'll be very evident that, whatever we are alleging as far as us having found this accused person in violation or in breach of one of their conditions of their recognizance, or i.e. failed to comply with the order, well, this will become very evident based on that background, how these conditions came to light, the fact that they were most certainly, active, if you will, at this time, and obviously, the essential elements being met in regards to this accused person, with the date, time, location, and, obviously the only other remaining thing, what we're alleging the person did to violate one of their conditions, or rather to breach one of their conditions. Of course, that's how the synopsis would go. So again, just to recap, the synopsis on a guilty plea, most certainly not a general occurrence report, most certainly not to be used for a general occurrence report to just merely be copied, pasted, and, sort of plug it into this consideration. No, the synopsis on a guilty plea, merely just a succinct portrayal that the matter is prima facie, date, time, location, facts and issue, presumably plausibly to the satisfaction of the justice of the peace when he or she now receives it electronically via Section 508 of the Criminal Code or Section 23 of the Provincial Offences Act, like we already talked about. So, with all that being said, I certainly hope this was insightful. I certainly hope it's going to best assist you moving forward in the creation of your very own synopsis on a guilty plea. As always, I of course appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos, to comment, to like, and with that all having been said, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care and have yourself a great day.